AskReddit, mental health workers of Reddit, what's the most messed up thing you have seen? Got stories for days. Thanks to a family member who worked as one of 3 mental health first responders in a meth-ravaged city of over 100,000. There's the dude who was found in the park with his hands completely rubbed raw because he was using rocks to remove his fingerprints. Severe paranoia, thought the mob and CIA were after him. The 600-pound lady who had a psychotic episode and thought God told her to reach inside of her cat, managed to fit her giant arm down the cat's throat, but when the cat died she couldn't get the cat off. Someone called the police because of the sound of someone shoving their arm down a live cat. Blood everywhere and deep scratches. She apparently got her arm in the down to about the elbow. My family member showed up after the cat was removed from her arm, but heard about the scene from more than one officer. He then had to interview this woman after she did that. Crazy stuff. Had a patient when I was in my psychiatry rotation in medical school who had said that he had killed 2 people when he was in a gang 15 years ago and was now hearing the voice of God telling to hurt himself as punishment. He kept darting his eyes around the room. Definitely creeped me out during the patient interview. I worked in a psychiatric medical institute for children. One girl, 13, had been pimped out by her mother and abused by several men. One night at bedtime routines, she hadn't come out of the shower yet and had locked herself in. When she finally opened the door, she had bit into her hand, and her veins and tendons were showing. She kept moving her hand to watch them move. Craziest thing was that once she was transported to the hospital, her mother made jokes about how her daughter just wanted to see what it tasted like. This girl basically turned into a celebrity around the campus because all the other children thought she was edgy for what she had done. While working in a jail, I was called down to someone's cell to assess him for homicidal ideations. When I got there, he had carved pieces of his legs out and stated he was a follower of Satan, whom told him he needed to release some spirits from his body. He had a long history of self-harm, including swallowing glass. He had a high threshold for pain. Jail was not a place he should have been at, but unfortunately mental health funding is one of the firsts to go when there are budget cuts. I work in the forensic side of mental health. Where do I begin? PT. Was drunk and was physically assaulted by her boyfriend. Upon arriving at the hospital is hysterical and tells nurse she was sexually assaulted in the back of the ambulance. Medic denies it. During the investigation both are asked to take lie detector tests. He passes. She fails and tries to commit suicide, saying the police have been horrible to her and accused her of lying for attention. She now has brain damage. DNA results come back. She was telling the truth. Woman claims her co-workers at a fast food restaurant are controlling her mind with their AirPods. They aren't really co-workers, they are secret military police. They make her black out and gang rape her. She gets pregnant and gives birth under their control, and they take the baby and start raping her too. Every night she can hear her daughter begging for help but cannot get to her. She starts calling 911 saying her daughter is being raped and ends up making dozens of calls before she is arrested for misusing 911. She never had a daughter. She refused to believe this and kept screaming at us to go find the bloody sheets in her closet as proof. There were no sheets. I've never seen a human being as scared as she was before that day. But none of it was real. Don't work in the mental health profession, but I remember when I was in basic combat training there was a girl in my platoon who often just stared at us without blinking. She'd open her mouth to speak but would just mumble. She'd sometimes say things about eyes being everywhere, watching her, and I think she refused to eat the food provided because she was paranoid. She had a weird speech pattern as well. And at night when we were asleep in the female barracks she was caught wandering around talking to herself and the supposed giant spiders she claimed to see crawling on the ceiling. Long story short, she was sent to the psych ward after having a mental breakdown that was triggered by the presence of the drill sergeants. She claimed they looked like demons. Come to find out, she was a paranoid schizophrenic, and they did not even catch that in her mental evaluation before shipping her to training. Not a worker, but when my sister was checked into a psych ward after a suicide attempt, I went and visited her and got to meet some interesting people. My sister had made some friends there, and one of her friends had hallucinations, auditory and visual. This boy was no older than 16, and his explanation of what he saw was fucking horrifying. Basically, he was always surrounded by ninjas who raped him and were always watching him. Now at first it sounds kind of bizarre and maybe even funny, but really think about it. Vanta black, hooded figures were always somewhere in the room watching him. The only visible thing on their bodies were the eyes. He said the ninjas would rape and torture him at random, and if they weren't doing that, they'd be in the corners of the room telling him to kill himself. This boy was always looking around, giving blank stares to random places in the room. The most effed up thing is that you'd see him start to tear up and shake, and you just felt so helpless. I hope he finds peace one day, and I think about him a lot. For more LPN. I was also a Navy corpsman and served in Iraq. This is the most fucked up mental health thing I think I've seen that wasn't a suicide. It stands out as tragic for a number of reasons. I'm a temp at this 50-bed skilled nursing facility. The facility itself is really, really nice. The owners are super nice. The administrator is a cow cunt who makes everyone want to die, but that's a story for another day. One day we get a new resident and she's a feisty one. I can't blame her. She was a hospital administrator, also an MD, who had made her way to the top. Rich as all get out. She was very recently diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. She's mid-50s. So this woman went from being a high-powered CEO/physician to one bad diagnosis to nursing home resident in the scope of 2 weeks. She is pissed off in ways that I don't think I can fully comprehend and hope I never do. I don't think people fully appreciate the level of indignity that can occur with going into a skilled nursing facility. She's fully ambulatory. She seems fine during many interactions. But she has dementia and no family, and this is the only place the hospital could legally release her to. This woman walks in with a closet full of fancy suits and is presented a dining room where all of her new neighbors are wearing plastic bibs. We're trying to be cool. We're trying to be supportive. We're trying to help preserve her dignity every way we can. We call her doctor instead of by first name. We're trying to have her see us as colleagues rather than her caregivers. Ultimately, though, this can be a terrible adjustment on a good day. She had her entire world turned upside down in the scope of a few weeks. While many of her fellow residents are wheelchair-bound, she, as I mentioned earlier, is not. She's up and around, fully active and rather physically fit. So as part of this attempt to ease things, we have her hanging around the nurse's station rather than languishing in her room. We're talking about doctors we all know, war stories, everything is settling in nicely. Then one day, she's telling us a funny story. She stops midway through and springs up from her chair. I'm confused. I'm about to ask if she's okay. She, with incredible urgency, pulls her antalar pants down to expose her ass, leans forward slightly and sprays yellow diarrhea all over the everything. She hits charts, she hits someone who was behind her, she got it into a coffee cup that was on the desk. The urge to shit was sudden and intense, and she was determined not to shit her pants. Which I can appreciate on some level, but I've dealt with a lot of poop. That was the poop that I couldn't get the smell out no matter what I did. I call it the Lady Macbeth shit. Nothing I did could get the spot, or the smell, off. Worst night of my life, man. a patient on our ward, with chronic schizophrenia and delusions of persecution, having already blinded himself in one eye and amputated a finger in the past, managed to get some craft scissors and castrate himself while under our care, and flushed his testicles down the toilet. He came out of his room into the hall with a bloody V down his hospital pant legs, a bit shaken looking, but otherwise calm. Just remembered another one. A 30-something guy, again with these religious-based delusions, became convinced that God wanted him to cut off his arm. So he built an elaborate guillotine in the woods near his town, and had the whole thing arranged where he chopped his own arm off, put a belt tourniquet on it, walked to town, and had someone call 911. He was brought to our hospital and medically stabilized, then transferred to our psych unit. When first admitted, he was clearly hallucinating the voice of God. He was completely unperturbed at the fact he did not have his right arm any longer. He was right-handed. After about a month of treatment, his psychosis diminished, and it was really sad to see the beginnings of regret forming for him. Wow, telling this one, a lot of other really fed-up stories are rushing back to me. I no longer work in inpatient mental health, I'm on the outpatient side now. I don't miss the intense horror and sadness at all. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If you were at all entertained, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing for future content. Stay safe everyone, until next time.